Welcome back to the Click Down. I'm Steve Beals, and today I am welcoming back Jason Samuel, Group Product Manager at Citrix, to the Click Down to discuss another exciting Citrix release. Jason, welcome back to the Click Down.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited for you to be back. I know second time on the podcast for you, and both times now it's going to be with some very exciting topics to discuss. And I know today we're going to be jumping in and discussing our newest GA release, which is Citrix DaaS for AWS Workspaces Core. And I know this has been in tech preview for some time and has just gone GA. And I know there's a lot of great reasons and features in this release. So really, I just want to dive right in with the questions that I know I have. So I guess the first question I have is what exactly is AWS Workspaces Core, and what are the main differences between this service and maybe deploying Citrix DaaS on AWS EC2?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. That's actually a great question to open with. So, EC2 has been around forever. It's computing in the cloud. I think Amazon AWS EC2 came out around 2006, and we've integrated with EC2 for many, many years now. But what EC2 is, it's infrastructure as a service primarily. It's compute and storage. We typically have to choose from 300 different instance types and figure out exactly what we need. In the end user computing space, that takes a lot of research and development, usually having to bring in consulting teams, having to have a lot of in-house knowledge and figure out what's the best way to deploy it. Essentially, EC2 is a bunch of Legos, and you're building your own environment and trying to have the best possible experience with an end user computing um, environment in the cloud that you've built yourself. With Workspaces Core, that has all been changed. It's actually designed for end user computing workloads. It is designed for virtual desktops in the cloud. It's managed by Amazon in specific data centers around the world, different EC2 data centers with specific hardware and cages. And there's a lot of operational things happening on the back end that takes away a lot of the things that you have to think about when you're deploying virtual desktops in the cloud.
Okay.
A lot of the guesswork is gone. A lot of the education that you have to deal with around the difference between cloud constructs and on-prem constructs and just kind of ramping up, all of that has been abstracted and made very simple in a 5-step process that Citrix puts on top of Workspaces Core. So that is the difference between IaaS and the Amazon Workspaces Core service. The other big thing about this is that from a pricing standpoint, typically with EC2, you'd have to pay as you go. It's variable, and a lot of cloud projects tend to stall out just because it's got runaway costs in the cloud, especially when you start to ramp up and you realize, hey, end user computing is very different than putting a web server in the cloud. It's very unpredictable. So your monthly price is just all over the place. With the Workspaces Core, we've got fixed price per user. So if you're paying $20 a month for a user, and let's say a business unit comes to you and says, hey, I've got 100 desktops I need to deploy for the next 6 months. I need to ramp up. How do we do this? You turn around and say, hey, it's 100 users, $20 a machine. And that's just an example. There's different machine levels you can have. But it's very predictable. You can turn around to business units within your organization and say, hey, I know for the first time ever the predictable costs in the cloud to run a virtual desktop in an Amazon data center. And I know I'm going to have the best possible experience with Citrix HDX and the admin experience and the end user experience that my users are used to. So it's very compelling how we've done this. We also, of course, have the EC2 integration, so it's up to the customer to choose. But really, the big driving force is around the fixed price per user, as well as some of the Microsoft partnership that we've all done here. We have the bring your own license for the operating system, Windows 10 and 11, not having to worry about the dedicated hardware part because that's all been abstracted now. So you can run Windows 10 or 11 without having to even think about it. And you get the Office Productivity Suite, so you can run M365, so Office. You can have the actual apps installed, like Word, Outlook, Teams, things like that. And you can't do that with EC2. So that's another big differentiator here.
Awesome. Yeah. I think that fixed pricing, is going to be, a big thing, especially, there's a lot of push obviously with, enterprises with cost optimizations and things of that nature. So having that fixed price and knowing what you have going in is a, like you said, is a big thing. So when we think about Citrix DaaS and how we're interacting with Workspaces Core, is this a separate service? I think back to like when we introduced managed desktops, right? We had managed
Mhm.
desktops in Azure, we had managed desktops in Google Cloud. Is this the same sort of like separate service, or are we just looking at this as like a resource location for Citrix DaaS?
That's a great question. So it's a little bit of both. It is a managed desktop service in the sense that Amazon has taken over the back end of the infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
they do the orchestration and they do the optimizations, they do the day-to-day management, even snapshotting the VMs. Uh, Essentially backups and being able to restore to a certain point in time. All of these things that an typical Citrix admin would have to think about, that's all been taken care of on the back end. So in that sense, it is managed. Now, our integration from a Citrix perspective, we're making direct API calls to the service. Traditionally, with some of our other hyperscaler level integrations like connecting to EC2, you'd go into the hosting node in Web Studio and you'd connect,
Mm-hmm.
and you're basically just talking directly with the hyperscaler, the cloud. But with this integration, we're actually connecting to the service, the Workspaces Core service, via APIs, including some custom APIs that we partnered together and wrote together and developed over the past few years. And it's a very, very deep integration. So a lot of the things like throttling, API limits, resource contention, things like that that happen with traditional cloud IaaS projects, you don't have to worry about that with this service. It's such a deep integration. It's two control planes talking to each other that are familiar with each other, designed to work together through these APIs. So that's a massive difference in the approach and how the integration is at such a deep level.
Awesome.
For this, from the Citrix perspective, though, as an admin, it's just a resource location. So
Okay.
that's why I meant it's a little bit of both. When you look at it within the zones, for example, in Web Studio, it's just a couple of connectors. There's a resource location, and you can have multiple regions. This is a global service, and you can have as many accounts connected as you want, as many cloud connectors, as many regions, and so on. But from a Citrix perspective, from an admin perspective, think of it as just another resource location,
Okay.
and everything's been abstracted for you.
Okay, good to know. And what about like if I'm a Citrix DaaS customer today, and I'm using tools like MCS and Autoscale or WAM analytics, all the great stuff that we provide to our customers. Am I still able to use all those with the same functionality as I do with my other resource locations?
Yeah, Steve. So that was the intent. We wanted to be able to give our customers the exact Citrix admin and end user experience that they're used to. So admins don't have to relearn anything, don't have to have a lot of cloud knowledge, don't have to bring in cloud teams and cloud ops teams and trying to figure things out. We wanted it to be just a very simple Web Studio only experience. So you don't have to jump between Web Studio and the AWS
Mm-hmm.
console. You're not flipping, you're not doing that context switching. It's just a 5-step process to get started. A lot of the end user things that like a user might get confused on, having to have multiple clouds or on-prem environments that connect to, all of that is gone. We use the one workspace portal, the one workspace app. You've got stuff coming from multiple clouds, you've got stuff coming from on-prem, and you've got stuff coming from Workspaces Core, and the end user has no idea where this stuff is coming from. All they know is that it performs really well because when you launch it, these VMs are always on and it just launches very, very fast, quick logins. So they see it from a performance perspective. Hey, this works really well. But beyond that, they have no idea that it is Workspace's core that is providing the service to them. Now, everything that the end user is used to using from a Citrix perspective is there because this is the HDX
Hmm.
protocol. So you do get to do like Teams optimizations. You can do, we have a lot of different telephony integrations that optimize using the HDX protocol. You can use that. You can use things like passwordless authentication, FIDO2 keys, all of the in-session stuff that you can do, all of that stuff with like clipboards and policy lockdowns that the admin is able to do for the end user. All of that is still there. As far as the services that we offer, things like WEM, it's meant to work together. You can absolutely install the WEM agent and use all of those same policies. You don't even have to use group policy. You can just use WEM. You can do things like session recording, our analytics, and everything that you're used to analyze your environment. All of that continues to work. Um, the Just to be fully transparent, though, you did mention MCS.
Hmm.
We are working on MCS type feature parity, but right now in the Web Studio, this is under the quick deploy node. And the quick deploy node, our intent at Citrix is to use that to be able to connect to different services like this, end user computing platforms. So that's why it's there, this direct API calls, which is a little bit different than MCS. So a lot of the feature set that you would see at a technical perspective from MCS is going to be here as well. It's just that we are making those deep API calls to do the actual orchestration, and the orchestration is happening. The provisioning is happening using the Workspaces APIs and that backend.
Okay, great. And so if I'm a EC2 customer today, or even if I'm not, you mentioned fixed pricing before, but what else, what else is in it for me, to say, hey, I'm going to move workloads to to AWS Workspaces Core.
Yeah, this is actually a partnership between really three different things. I would say three key organizations that come together and do best of breed. Think of it as merging best of breed across everything end user computing. So
Hmm.
we've got Citrix, we've got Amazon, and we got Microsoft in the play. Essentially building the most friendly virtual desktop solution in the cloud with pretty much guaranteed success with deployment and guaranteed operational budget success, I would say,
Right.
with the solution, which primarily with cloud-based end user computing in the past, these are the things that cause the projects to fail. Really, it's about misconfiguring potentially or not deploying according to best
Hmm.
practices because the best practices are always changing and so on, or because the runaway costs. When you start a POC with 100 users, great. It's pretty easy to figure out what your costs are
Right.
going to be. And at the end of the month, your bill is going to be that. When you start scaling to 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 end users, and each one of them is different and uses a desktop differently and has different expectations in performance and the number of hours they use it during the day, this becomes kind of unpredictable. And so your monthly cost starts to go up much higher than you predicted, and sometimes you have to pare down the project, sometimes you have to scale it back, or figure out how to contain the budget there. So we've completely eliminated all of these concerns, essentially creating this three-way partnership. The Citrix portion of it is that you just have a DaaS entitlement. So if you have Citrix today, if you're using Citrix DaaS, you have this already. You go under your quick deploy node, you will see this feature, and it's a 5-step process. You can go from zero to desktop simply by connecting your AWS account and just running through the wizard, uploading your image, and then you can just deploy to as many desktops as you like to as many end users as you like.
Okay.
Again, the Citrix admin doesn't have to learn cloud, doesn't have to jump between AWS console and Citrix console. It's all within the Citrix console in that 5-step process. And it's really nothing new for them. And for the end user, as I mentioned, everything is aggregated in the Workspace app. So whether it's Workspaces Core, other clouds, on-prem, they have no idea. So from a Citrix perspective, it's perfect. It's included, essentially. From Amazon, that's where the billing actually happens. This gets billed to your Amazon account monthly for the usage, either at fixed price. There's also an hourly option as well that we will have out soon, but it allows you to pay as you go for the VMs. But right now it's fixed price. That's really the most popular mechanism for billing here, and what we want to do to help kind of control cloud costs. So that is what we have today. There is no monthly commitment, so you can ramp up into the cloud as needed, and you can ramp them or scaled down
Hmm.
actually. So let's say that you're having some M&A activity within your organization. A business unit comes to you and says, "Hey, I've got 100 vendor users, offshore users, or whatever it could be that could be happening, and I need 100 desktops just for 6 months. Can you make that happen, please, Citrix team?" And the Citrix team can turn around to that business unit and say, "Yes, I can make that happen. Here's the cost. It's 100 users times 20 times the number of months you need." And I'm just using 20 as an
Yeah.
example, but it's actually can be even cheaper than that, but we'll get to that in a second. Um, so you can actually go around to this business unit and say, "Hey, this is the predictable cost for it." Now, if that business unit comes back in 6 months and say, "Hey, the project is running over. I need it for 50 users now, not 100, but I need 50 users for 3 more months." Well, you can turn around to that business unit and say, "Not a problem. We'll ramp down the 50 that aren't going to be used, and the 50 that you need, you'll continue to be billed for them. $100, 50 users times $20 times 3 months." So extremely predictable, especially for chargeback purposes for large organizations where you need to bill back to that business unit. This is just very easy to turn around and say, "Yeah, I can give you desktops, and I for the first time can tell you the exact
Right.
cost of doing that." So um, going a little bit more into the cost for this, um, there is, when you use the Workspaces Core, when you go look at actually pricing for this, when you type in Amazon Workspaces pricing, because that's going to be the question for everybody that's listening, what is the pricing for it? If you go to Google, type in Amazon Workspaces pricing, there's going to be 2 pages, right? The first listing that probably comes up is going to be Workspaces native pricing, and the second one is Workspaces Core. The difference is Workspaces Core is designed to work with Citrix. It's designed to work with partners. It's API driven. You're not using the workspace client, you're not using the WSP protocol, um, you're using all Citrix. So um, to offset some of that cost of Citrix licensing potentially that you may need to incur, there's a 20% discount off computing. So if you look at the 2 price matrices, you'll notice the Workspaces Core pricing for the exact same desktop is much cheaper than the native pricing, and that's again to help with the cost of the Citrix DaaS entitlement. Now, if you already are a Citrix customer, then you're just pretty much getting a free 20% discount, which is
Hmm.
great for you. On top of that, larger enterprises have this thing called EDP. It's the Enterprise Discount Program. So basically, whatever the organization has negotiated with Amazon, that applies. That commit applies to this as well. So let's say that Workspaces pricing, these are just examples, but let's say the bare machine could be like, or Workspace's native VM could be like $20 a month. Citrix with Workspaces Core brings it down to $16 a month, and then with your EDP, potentially it could be running for $8, $9 a month.
Wow.
Just depending on what you've negotiated with Amazon. So that's the benefit of using these multiple stackable discounts with your Amazon account. Um, so that kind of covers the budgeting for that. Now, the third piece of this is the Microsoft piece. So with Microsoft, you get the Office, the operating system, and the productivity suite. So you can do Microsoft, bring your own license for the operating system. So Windows 10 and Windows 11, all you have to do is just make sure that you're E3 or E5, which most enterprise customers are. If you're an educational customer, then A3 and A5. There's also Business Premium, which is a lower one that's also compatible with this.
Hmm.
But most Citrix customers are going to be E3 or E5, and you get to bring Windows 10 and 11, not have to worry about anything at all. You just basically is a check mark on the account, and you're ready to roll with that. Then, as of last year, M365, last August specifically, M365 is for the first time ever allowed to run in another cloud other than Azure, and you can run it now in Workspaces Core. You can't run it in EC2. So if you're still trying to put stuff in EC2, end user computing EC2, you can continue to do that, but you can't run M365. But with this new agreement, with this new agreement between Microsoft, Amazon, and the Workspaces team, you can run actual M365 installed apps, so Office apps, within this environment using your E3 or E5 entitlement. So this is very, very exclusive, and it also works with things that you might expect to work with the actual productivity suite. For example, getting a little bit technical in the weeds here, but SSO has always been a challenge for many folks because they don't know that you have to hybrid Azure AD join the VM
Hmm.
in order to get the PRT token, the primary refresh token, and that's what allows for SSO and that seamless experience when you log in. Some folks don't realize that and have this double login issue. With this, you can actually do hybrid Azure AD join to Azure AD, have the PRT token, log into the OS, and you're logged into Teams, you're logged into PowerPoint, Word, and so on. And this is not something that has really ever been offered before. So all of this can actually be optimized with the Citrix HDX protocol as well. So the Teams optimization, when you SSO into Teams and you load it up and you look at the top, it says optimized by Citrix HDX. You're using the Rendezvous protocol, the EDT protocol. So like call centers, they love this because you're using the best possible uh, visualization experience, the best audio experience, and you don't even have to think about it. It's always
Just
going to
happening,
be,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
just happening. As long as you got the best, as long as you got the latest VDA and the latest workspace client, you're always going to have the best possible experience on the planet. Basically, you're always up to date. And it's not just Teams. So we have a lot of customers. I'm getting a little bit more detailed here, but we have a lot of customers with a large number of folks that are distributed around the globe, call centers and so on. So we actually at Citrix we do a lot of unified
Right.
communications optimizations and contact center, the CCAS optimizations. All of those partners, all those optimizations will work here with Workspaces Core, including Amazon Connect. We actually have some a white paper out there and some blogs out there about Amazon Connect, which is a really nice CCAS solution, contact center solution. It's also powered with AI, generative AI powered assistance, and all of this actually works through the HDX protocol just as efficiently as if you were in one office, even though you could have a globally distributed team. But that's the benefit of using Citrix
Yeah.
HDX.
No. Yeah.
So in summary, just the three big organizations, Citrix, Amazon, and Microsoft, coming together to build essentially the best possible virtual desktop
Yeah,
experience.
and it really seems like if I look at this like two ways, if I'm like just starting out on like an EUC journey, right, and I'm like, listen, I'm going, I'm looking for a cloud provider, I'm moving away from on prem, I'm hosting all these virtual desktops, this seems like a really great option for this, right? Because you've said now, great detail, like you got three main players, best of breed, the pricing is there, what it's going to be. But I also think on the flip side of, hey, I'm existing today, or and I have thousands of desktops and I'm trying to cut costs or whatever it may be, right? It just seems like it's a great opportunity, and to provide a great experience to end users.
Yep, absolutely, Steve. That was the intent of the
Yep.
design, to be able to meet the customer where they are. If this is a new greenfield deployment, it's very easy to get started. If you've got an existing environment, you've got some on-prem stuff that you need to get into the cloud, you can run parallel, and that's the beauty of using the Citrix platform, is that you can have stuff coming in from multiple areas of the world, multiple data centers and cloud providers, and just have it all run side by side and you move at your pace. The end users don't have to see that. They
Right.
don't have to suffer through
Right.
anything. They continue to use the systems without disruption. You as an admin get to cherry pick how you want to move things and move at your pace. So that's what's really friendly about this.
Yeah, and I kind of think about use cases as well. Like you mentioned before, like call centers. It's a great use case for that. If you're looking to spin up M&A, thinking about developers, but even like a DR scenario, I could see like this really helping out in those situations as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. So we've gotten a lot of customers that are essentially using the solution for their DR. We have customers that have multiple data centers. They have very critical, secure data that needs to remain in the data center. So they continue to have the on-prem footprint, but they also need general purpose DR. And this is a great way to be able to burst into the cloud as needed and only pay for DR on consumption. But these desktops are always ready to go. And it's just an environment just kind of running in almost a
It's
warm
awesome.
standby mode for them.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, we've touched on it a bit here, around authentication. You mentioned, some of the things around Azure AD. And, when I think about Citrix Cloud and the authentication methods that we provide, it sounds like, anything that we have there today, that we provide and support is still going to be available within it, within this new service, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So for folks listening on the call or on the podcast, the there's two things to think about when we're thinking about authentication for end user computing. There's always the front door, right? That's the user identity. It's to get the user in and logged into the system. The second identity that is often overlooked is the machine identity. So the machine has to have its own identity and has to be connected somehow. And what Citrix does, when you log in, you're talking to that first identity provider that gets the user in. And then once you're logging into the session, the machine identity kicks over, trusts the user, and allows the user to be able to access certain things on the network, certain applications, and so on. So there's two sets of identity happening there. With Citrix, you can do anything. So any IDP. We recommend OpenID Connect, which is the latest and greatest web authentication out there. It's modern web authentication. You can also use SAML 2.0, which is an older form of web authentication, but also acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and of course, we can support backwards down to just regular Azure AD and Okta password-based options, but it's also the newer WebAuthn FIDO2 passwordless options. So if you're a company that is looking at FIDO2 keys or looking at Authenticator, looking at pass keys, things like that, these are the options that you can use with Citrix. You can also use Ping Identity Duo. There's so many different identity providers we support.
Right.
OpenID Connect and SAML 2.0 are just kind of open. You can as long as your identity provider supports it, we support it. And then going back into some of the older identity protocols, you can use Radius if you really need to. I hope not, but if your organization is using Radius, you can do that. You can use on-prem NetScalers. So anything that you protect with NetScalers, let's say use ADFS, Active Directory Federation Services, and you're using cert-based auth, like PIV cards and so on. You can absolutely continue doing that. You even have the ability to use Active Directory plus the Citrix TOTP. So if you're a customer that has just legacy Active Directory and that's the only identity provider you have and you have no other multi-factor authentication option, we will provide multi-factor
Mm-hmm.
authentication for you as part of the service because we want you to be secure. And there's so many different options that you can use here. So that's the end user experience logging in. But once you're inside the system, there is a requirement for Active Directory right now, so that it does require line of sight to Active Directory. That's for the machine identity portion. You can run the Active Directory, the domain controller on-prem, and you can use Direct Connect so that the VPC that the virtual desktops are running in can actually talk to that Active Directory, or you can run the domain controllers in EC2 as well, or as a service. I mean, there's multiple ways to do it, but it does need line of sight to Active Directory for that machine identity piece.
Okay.
With that said, you can also use Azure AD, so you can do hybrid Azure AD joins. So it's a combination of both today.
All right, good to know. What about when I'm thinking about deploying, desktops and, obviously Windows 10, Windows 11, but what about, multi-session OS? Is that going to be available in this service?
Yeah, so we just actually, well, let me take it back. We initially started the project using Windows 10 and Windows 11, which are single session operating systems, and it's working great. We just recently supported started support for Server OS, and we have single session that we just released. Multi-session is when you think about Citrix, traditionally you think about Server OS and
Mm-hmm.
multi-session and the traditional Zen app, if you will, type of experience. So we are gathering customer feedback on this one, and we are prioritizing. If there are any customers out there listening to this podcast right now and would like to see Server OS with multi-session with Workspaces Core and do that traditional Citrix experience, please, reach out to me, let me know. I'm happy to talk to you and just kind of explain some of our long-term roadmap and trying to get your feedback too and see how we should prioritize this.
Awesome. Okay. And what, we kind of touched on it way back in the beginning of the podcast. But if I have an existing image and I'm like, hey, I want to bring this into Workspaces Core. We have tools like Image Portability Service. Am I able to use that tool to migrate an image into the service?
Yeah, you can actually use image portability service to move an on-prem image into EC2, and then you can actually bring it into the Workspaces core environment. There is an ingestion process there. But with that said, Workspaces core is better to actually use a blank ISO from Microsoft for that initial ingestion process, just a blank Windows 11 OS, for example. The reason is during the ingestion process, you're going from an EC2 AMI to Workspaces core on that custom hardware,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of optimizations and stuff that the Workspaces that happens on Workspaces. It is essentially managed desktops, right? So it checks the image for multiple things and ensures that it's essentially pre-optimized as it's landing into the environment. Um, Sometimes agents and software that are already pre-installed in the image can disrupt this ingestion process, especially like security agents. They're really usually deep fangled into the OS. They have filter drivers and so on. These things could potentially disrupt the ingestion process and cause it to fail, which means you have to retry again. Remove that software and then retry. So for that reason, we recommend using a clean image as you bring it over.
Okay.
But once it's in Workspaces Core, you can do whatever you like with no issues. You can drop all those agents back on there. You can install the software, customize however you want. There is no having to re-upload every time. It's just a one-time process. After that, you can use that base image and create multiple images from it. So you can have an image for accounting team. You can have one for the marketing team, put custom hardware, or pardon me, custom software in there. Carve it up however you like, and you don't have to go through that ingestion again or move images around anymore. Super quick to be able to essentially clone your image out to however you need. But I do want to say, I mean, that this is kind of getting into best practices, and kind of what we touched on the last podcast when I was on. But automation is really big.
Mm-hmm.
To be successful in the cloud, automation is key. There is a lot of automation with this integration that we're doing as well. I didn't even touch on some of that stuff, but a lot of it's abstracted for the end user. But customers that are listening to this, automation is really key for any cloud project. Even though that we abstracted a lot and made it very UI friendly, we do have APIs available for this so that you can write your own automations around it. They are available today. And really from an image perspective, image pipelines are very, very important. So if you have questions about automating not only infrastructure, but also looking at image pipelines and what are the best practices around building a proper image and having that replicatable and without errors and kind of have that continuous iteration around your images, please do reach out. Let's chat. We have a lot of things that we are prioritizing there, and we've released a lot of support. As you know, Steve, I think we talked about on the last podcast, we've got Terraform
Yep.
compatibility. We are bringing Terraform compatibility to this solution as well.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great. You know how excited I am about Terraform. So
I do, and our customers are too. It's
yeah.
amazing to see the usage. Every day I smile because I go and look at the forums and I see all the interactions from the customers on GitHub, for example, and there's a lot of two-way communication between our engineering teams and customers,
That's
and I
great.
just love to see that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So last question I have is really around, if I'm a customer and I'm like, hey, I want to try this out. I want to POC it. What do I need to do? Are there any prerequisites? How do I get started by doing this?
Yeah, it's super easy to do. So as long as you have a Citrix DaaS entitlement, you have it already. You just go log into Web Studio. All the way at the bottom is the quick deploy option. So you go click on that, and then you will see this new blade pop up, and you will see Amazon Workspaces Core there. You click on that homepage that it lands you on. It's a 5-step process. You basically connect your account, choose the resource location, choose the Active Directory, because you can bring as many Active Directories as you like. Larger organizations have multiple Active Directories, different forests, and so on. You can bring whatever you like, have different types of machine identity there, and even user identity. But you connect those three, and that's it. You connect those three. You've got essentially your billing for the account. You've got your identity, and you're pretty much ready to go. The last two steps are more of the operational ones. Step 4 is to bring in the image that you like. And then step 5 is actually deploying the desktop. So you've got 6 or 7 different desktop types that are pre-optimized for you. 2 of them being NVIDIA graphics backed. So you've got the big heavy use cases,
Mm-hmm.
rendering, SCADA systems, ArcGIS, some of the heavier things like Adobe Premiere, things that you might do for like visualization type work. This like SolidWorks and so on, CAD software, things like that. We support that as well. So it's up to you to choose like what kind of desktop you'd like to deploy to a group of users, but that's the last step. So essentially from step 1 to step 5, you can knock it out in like half a day.
Awesome.
It just depends on the speed that you want to go and how your organization is set up for it. But we've had customers that have launched into POCs within half a day.
Perfect. Well, Jason, I really appreciate you jumping on again, joining me today. I know I'm excited about this, new release. I know we have customers who are, probably right now itching to get going as well. So I do appreciate you jumping on. We'll have to keep it going. I can't wait for the next time you're on, because it's always something great. So I look forward to that.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. And thank you, listeners, for giving us the time. And please do feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and if you're interested in any more information, on Citrix DaaS for AWS for Workspaces Core and how to get it deployed, we do have a recently released deployment guide for this. So, go over there and check that out. And, with that wraps up season 3 of the ClickDown. And I'd like to thank all of my guests who joined me this season, and, for all the great topics we've discussed, and, all the listeners as well. Thank you for joining. Looking forward to season 4. I've already started planning for season 4 that will kick off this fall. So be on the lookout for that. So again, thank you for joining. Have a wonderful summer. And as always, this has been the ClickDown.